What's the trashiest wedding you've been to? The bride made a speech thanking her in-laws for financial assistance for the event. Her mother was not thanked and she was furious. There was a long head table for bridal party and parents. It was made out of small tables pushed together covered by one long tablecloth. The mother pulled a small table out of the arrangement, catching the tablecloth, and nearly destroying the head table set up. Now the bride got angry and there was much back and forth with various family members attempting to make peace. The mother refused to push back her table and began to invite others to sit with her. All people who were not meant to be seated at the front. Mother of bride continued to sit there and talk shit about her daughter. The bride, to anyone who would listen. Woo boy. This is my time to shine. So my uncle was a preacher but also owned a restaurant. A 16-year-old got married to her 17-year-old boyfriend in the back room. Her name was Candy. After the ceremony she opened her wedding gifts like it was her birthday. One of the waitresses, Brenda, had given her her old lingerie as a gift. I remember during the reception, Candy went out back to throw the lingerie into a dumpster while Brenda sang, "These boots were made for walking," on karaoke. For their honeymoon, her mom bought them a room at the Holiday Inn around the corner. But they got bored so they came home. The best man screwed the groom's mother between the meal and the dancing. The groom finds out and punches the best man, breaking his hand. The best man drives away and gets stopped by the police for drunk driving. Being a wedding photographer is awesome. Wedding was in a suburban driveway. The maid of honor stole the bouquet from someone's garden and the best man proudly announced he had shoplifted the rings. The groom wore a button-down shirt that said, "Fuck off," in fancy lettering. The bride stopped in the middle of the vows to tell her mother to get that fucking kid out of here. It was her second kid by the previous bloke. When it was over, we apologized to the celebrant. He said he'd seen worse. I once worked a wedding where come time for the first dance no one could find the groom. Turns out, he went to the resort's shooting barn to shoot clay pigeons. Upon learning this news, the bride reacted by cursing up a storm on the dance floor. Probably my dad's second marriage. Along the banks of a river with trailer homes in the background. He's wearing a tuxedo t-shirt and rainbow mirror sunglasses. The ceremony took place at noon. He'd been drinking since 5 a.m. I had to walk one of the bridesmaids down a flight of steps as she was legally blind. And someone asked me if I was going to bang her. Sighs. Both of my middle sister's weddings. Don't get me wrong. She's the sane one of my sisters and I actually really love her. But she has a, shall we say, unique sense of style. Wedding number 1 was while she was working as a carny, and was held after closing time on the Midway at some Podunk County fair. I may well have been the only sober person there. And there were definitely more tattoos than teeth in attendance. She wound up leaving him when he turned out to be an abusive self-centered twat who contributed nothing to taking care of their kid. Wedding number 2, just last year, was mostly okay. And Bill is a really stand-up guy. But y'all, the whole wedding theme was camo. My sister wore a camouflage wedding dress and matching Crocs. Bill wore jeans and a dress shirt with a camo vest. The frigging cake was covered in camo patterned ribbons and IDK where the hell she got camo patterned silk roses, but the cake had a pile of those too. Ceremony was in a park, not booked or decorated. Just showed up and found a spot. Reception was at a scout hall. No decorations again. And for catering the bride's family went through Red Rooster drive-thru and got a bunch of whole chickens and chips. Like 5 different cars went through one after the other and ordered. They didn't even pre-order. Groom and all his friends were high as kites, and only reason bride wasn't is because she announced she was knocked up. Groom and his mates bought their dirt bikes and after eating went out and rode them around the hall. Was so loud and muddy. My friend group and I talk about this wedding to this day. And probably will for the rest of our lives. The bride and groom decided to do things on a very, very small budget. That's fine. Frugal weddings and budget weddings can be beautiful and nice. There is a difference between a frugal wedding and a cheap wedding. However, and this was cheap. For instance, the wedding was in July. They decided to hold it in a non-air-conditioned park shelter. The decorations were actual trash. The bride decided me and the other bridesmaids needed tiny top hats, which she made from discarded styrofoam cups. Mine had ants in it. She asked me to be the mo. I was flattered but confused. She'd had 3 moss before me, and they all quit for various reasons. Mostly baby daddy drama related. She wanted live music but wouldn't pay a pianist. My friend Steven's sister said she'd play the wedding march on a keyboard for $50. Said sister couldn't actually play the piano, but she did the pre-recorded wedding march song. Nobody could tell the difference because the woman in charge of baking the cake got shit-faced the day before and was baking the cake in the non-air-conditioned park shelter's little kitchen while listening to the radio very loudly. The bride and groom tried to write their own vows, got in a fight over it, and didn't tell the officiant until the day of that there were no vows. Fortunately, he was on it and had backup vows ready to go. The bride hadn't tried on her dress, which she'd bought from AliExpress, until the day of. It was way too small and we had to rip out the back and safety pin in some satiny white fabric, which would have been great if the dress hadn't been off-white. The groom made comments and it turned out that the whole dress thing was based on his mom offering to pay for the dress, then rescinding because she had to bail out his brother, my friend. Instead of going to an actual store and buying a dress, picked one off of AliExpress. This would have been less weird if I hadn't been dress shopping with her like 3 times because her mom wouldn't pick out a mother of the bride dress. The groom's entire family, including his best man and his 2 groomsmen, left right after the meal. Spaghetti, green beans, and McDonald's orange drink was served. The DJ, my friend Steven and his Bose speakers, didn't know this and tried to announce the groom's dance with his mom. His mom had left. Apparently his family was furious that it was a dry venue. The only member of the family left was the ring bearer, who it turns out was forgotten. We had to take him home because his family wouldn't come get him. The groom slept through the rehearsal and showed up to the wedding drunk. We had to put another friend on bouncer duty because 2 of the bride's aunts tried to walk away with the cash envelope. We gave him the envelope because he was the tallest and we figured he could outrun the aunts. The bride's brother was originally on envelope duty, but we caught him taking a 50 out of the envelope, so we had to take it from him. We had to politely inform the best man he couldn't smoke in the porta-john. We had porta-johns instead of actual working bathrooms. The worst, though, was the photographer. As Mo, I was informed day of that I had to keep the photographer 100 feet away from the ring bearer and flower girls at all times. He was a registered sex offender, but also the bride's uncle, and he volunteered to do the pictures for free. So, he ended up using a telephoto lens, because he couldn't get close enough to the wedding party to take the pictures. They divorced a couple months later after the house they were staying in burned to the ground. I have no idea to this day why they even got married. Reception held in, essentially, a metal pole barn, while the DJ plays the wedding classic hits of Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under? And Who's Cheating Who? Quote, The piss-poor air conditioning and insulation causes the guests to figuratively melt. Unfortunately, the wedding cake literally melts and the top 2 layers topple onto the floor. The cake is rebuilt into a frankencake off of bits on the floor by a couple of guests hoping to save the bride trauma. Fortunately, only a handful of guests are served this cake before it is replaced with sheet cake. We sat at our school cafeteria-style tables and tried to drink away our misery 1 cup of Busch Light at a time. But the hand tap on the keg leaked like crazy, requiring a full-body calisthenic workout to squeeze out a cup of foam every few minutes. A wedding on the beach behind Hooters. The officiant stood next to a trash bin, as if it was planned. The trash collector pulled up during the vows. Did he wait to change the bag? Absolutely not. Children at the wedding swarmed the couple like the flies around the trash can just after the kiss, stepping all over her dress. She bent over to adjust her sandal and a pack of Marlboro Reds fell out of the bust along with her right breast. It felt like we were rubbernecking instead witnessing a marriage. I went to a wedding in a funeral home once. Drove by it 3 times before realizing that it was in fact the correct address for the venue. Reception and ceremony were there. Completely dry wedding too. I was actually the bartender, but it was a hoot. First, wedding was outside and it stormed violently. Groom was hammered pre-wedding. Hit on all the bartenders. Then the DJ got hammered. Made lewd comments to women in the microphone. Then basically everyone was hammered. Knocked over the wedding cake, which also happened to be a table with many candles. So the place caught on fire. Good times. Often wonder how that marriage worked out. A family member was at a wedding where the groom's mother was feeding Pakistani sweets to the bride. She dropped one on her expensive wedding dress. They can be sticky and messy. And the bride says, "You ruined my wedding dress, you bitch." Grooms tells his wife to apologize. She refused, so the groom tells her she's getting divorced and leaves with his family. Everyone else start leaving too. They had signed the wedding papers a day before. Oof. Everyone got super drunk before wedding starts. Even groom throw up on the stage while bride is hardly walk straight to him with drunk AF face. Come and think of it. Maybe funniest one. I DJ weddings. Nowadays I have my own company. But years ago, I was hired out by another company. This wedding was from them. The cake topper depicted a bride dragging a groom by the scruff of the neck. The groom and his groomsmen were all in baggy, ill-fitting suits and dirty running shoes. They at least waited until after the ceremony to put on their also dirty baseball caps. At one point there was supposed to be a special dance. But no one could find the groom. So that dance didn't happen. The bridesmaids were drunk enough that they both loved and hated every song I played and expressed this to me as I dropped each tune. I don't take gigs like that anymore. A friend of the family is a wedding photographer. We went to dinner with her family a few weeks ago and she explained the most bizarre wedding she had ever been to, which happened to be that same day, and involved someone we all know. Wedding was behind a trailer in a trailer park, folding chairs, clearly labeled, property of school. There were 2 church pews. And several 5-gallon buckets turned upside down. Some of the wedding party arrived on riding mowers. The bride was wearing some screen-printed t-shirt, jeans, and a veil made from cheesecloth. The groom was wearing a jean vest with no shirt underneath in torn jeans. The bride had met the groom just over 3 months prior, as the groom was still married to his first wife at the time. Divorce takes 90 days here. Do the math. Most of the guests were dressed like they were in the middle of doing yard work. Reception was in the same area. Several cases of PBR and Miller Lite. Supermarket pre-boxed cheese and cracker spreads. and a few Bojangles fried chicken boxes. A family member of mine's second wedding reception was held inside an indoor gun range. The groom was obviously an avid hunter because the entire wedding party was wearing camouflage suits, and the bonus was the open bar, consisting on 2 kegs of Coors Light sitting trash cans filled with ice. There were no tables and chairs. Like none. They had an open bar but no fucking chairs. Everyone had to put their drink on the ground and hold their plate to eat. It was fucking crazy. Everyone just assumed that some sort of terrible thing happened where the tables and chair people didn't bring them, but afterwards I asked her, the bride, what happened, and she just said, "Oh, we would have had to pay extra for that." Ooh, I've got one of these. But it was a fake wedding. Unknown to the guests ahead of time. Many of the details are things we found out later. So, the wedding. Everything felt very tense. And groom looked like he might cry standing at the altar. Bride entered in a dress that didn't fit properly. It had a large long skirt with hoop. But the dress was too short and the hoop was too big. So it sat up on an angle and bounced around awkwardly as she moved. The ceremony itself seemed quite strained. And having recently been married ourselves, the wife and I noticed that the celebrant didn't say the specific line legally required for a wedding in Australia. And no paperwork was signed. Also required in Australia. At the reception, almost all of table 1, which had bride, groom's families, turned out it was groom's family that left immediately after the reception started. Groom's dad was meant to pay for the bar tab but did not do so before leaving. Bride and groom avoided each other apart from an incredibly awkward first dance. They separated weeks later. So, flashing back a bit, bride and groom were quite young. But with bride several years older than groom. They'd been dating for a while. And a lot of people in our circle of friends had been getting married. Bride was very set on marriage. And groom proposed willingly. As time went on, groom was getting cold feet. He didn't want to break up with bride. Or even necessarily to call off the engagement. But wasn't ready to be married. Bride was not pleased. And pressured groom to continue. Groom's parents were in very poor health at the time. And when groom tried to say he wasn't ready again, bride started to harass his parents about him trying to back out. Groom foolishly agreed to go ahead with the wedding in order to stop this harassment. Bride was still not happy with groom's attitude, and asked the celebrant to come talk to them, hoping he would talk groom around. Celebrant, being an absolute legend, and really, just doing his job properly, refused to marry them once he was told that one party was unwilling, offering the compromise that he could officiate a commitment ceremony which is not legally binding. Bride took him up on this offer, but insisted on not telling anyone and pretending it was a proper wedding. In Australia, some paperwork needs to be filed 30 days in advance. So there was no time to get an alternative celebrant. And there were evidently a lot of deposits which were not refundable so close to the event.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.